Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to WP Roundtable episode 168. My name is Kyle Maurer. I work for a company called Sandhills Development, making a product called Easy Digital Downloads and some others. We've been doing that for a little while now and having a lot of fun with it. And I'm here today with my friend Kevin Hoffman, who works over at a company called WordPress, and they make products including the GiveWP plugin, which is pretty sweet, and an upcoming plugin we're going to talk a little bit about called Business Reviews. So what's happening today, Kevin?
Not much, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming on the show. It's always been a pleasure talking with you, and I've been looking forward to this conversation.
I think we caught up last time in an airport somewhere between WordCamp US and home.
That might have been it. Yeah.
That was our first sit-down conversation, but it's good to catch up with you again.
Yeah, for sure. And we've had conversations before. Or I've had quite a few conversations before with other members of your team. You are the third or fourth person from the GiveWP team, I think, who's been on this show over the 4 years that we've been doing this. Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to dive into your background, talk about the topics that interest you and the plugins that you're working on. Before we do that, we're going to jump on our quick picks of the week. This is just a quick part of the program where we share something new on our mind that we've encountered, that we think is interesting or fun or just worth sharing. And there's a few things that have come across my way recently, but one of the coolest articles that I recently read, which I just enjoyed it a lot, took a lot from it, thought it was a great example of something that I've been trying to learn more about. And that's an article on Medium written by Rachel Thomas titled, "If you think women in tech is just a pipeline problem, you haven't been paying attention." And it's all about the gender gap that we have in technology with a ton of information, just like really good, well-researched, well-cited, and comprehensive look at this picture of the problem that we have in tech, where it's all guys that look like me and Kevin, and we want to work on that. And unfortunately, it's not a really easy problem to solve, but there are people working hard on it, coming up with creative ways to address it. Smarter people than me, and I'm trying to follow them, pick up what they're laying down, and learn from it and be better. And so I encourage you to read the article. It's a long read, but check it out. Kevin, you got anything cool to share?
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna bookmark that one for sure. So two kind of related ones for me would be a YouTube channel called Layout Land by Jen Simmons. She was one of the key proponents behind CSS Grid, which I've been learning a lot more about lately. And Layout Land is like a series of videos that kind of take you from the basics of Grid. But what's unique about her, I think, is that she gives you a lot of ways to implement Grid now, even though there are still some browsers lagging behind in terms of support for it. But she's really a big proponent of using the best of what CSS has to offer here and now, even though it may not be available to absolutely everyone.
Sure. Wow.
So a related one to that would be gridbyexample.com, which is by Rachel Andrew. And it is just a lot of CSS Grid examples, different layouts, page layouts, galleries, things like that you can just sort of fork from her code pens and put into production. So those two ladies I totally look up to, especially when it comes to CSS Grid, because they were such driving forces behind getting it implemented in the first place. So
way cool. That's good stuff. Yeah, everybody take a look at that. If I were to share a second thing, it would be like, I'm digging this microphone, which is brand new. Just got it like 2 days ago. And does it sound okay, Kevin? You can hear me just fine?
Yeah, for sure.
Nice and clear.
What do you got there?
It's an Audio-Technica ATR 2100. And I'm pretty happy with it. I've been getting by with the Blue Yeti for a couple of years by now. But this I'm happy with, and it sounds a lot better. It was a gift from my good friend, or probably a mutual friend, Adam Silver.
Nice.
We co-host a podcast together, the Get Options podcast, and we just wanted to up our game. We could up with this good mic, and I love it. So you're welcome, listeners, to this program as well. All right, Kevin, let's dive into your background a little bit. Let's get to know you better, just in case there's anyone tuning in now or in the future who doesn't know your full story or is scratching their head wondering, who's this Kevin guy? Let's fill them in just a little bit and go back to a point before your career was really on track and you were doing much with the web. You didn't even know Matt Cromwell and Devin.
The dark ages.
Yeah, those days where you were just young with some ambition, maybe. You thought, I might try and do something with my life here. I'm going to try this. I think this is where I should go. This is how I fit into the world. Yeah. I'm going to try and do something. So take us to that point where young you set out on a career path.
So I've always had sort of an artistic interest. I was that like grade school kid who was big into art classes, but I kind of hit a plateau very early on in my education where I didn't have the hand-drawn ability that my mind wanted. And that quickly kind of drew me to digital art because I found that medium gave me the possibilities and the tools needed to kind of realize what was in my head in a way that I couldn't through more traditional art. So that was probably the very first stepping stone towards digital art and web design, eventually what I got into today. But it was around like middle school, and my sister had an internship where she brought home a Photoshop 7 CD. And that was really my first step into digital art. And I remember doing message board signatures at the time. If you remember, Kyle, those like horizontal, little like 600 by 100 pixel things at the bottom of every message board in the early 2000s. And so I was like pumping out these little message board signatures and changing them on a daily basis for these like graphic design forums where there would be contests and things like that. And eventually I wanted to start messing around with web design. I think I started with Front Page in my high school years. Ended up doing a website for my high school soccer team all through Front Page. And I'm sure, I guarantee it only worked on one browser, Internet Explorer. But that was kind of what got my interest going in web design, and then ended up going to Drexel University, where I did some more web design, animation, and game design as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so you went to school, and were you working during school?
Yeah, so that was actually my introduction to WordPress was through a student job there, where I came on board to a team that had a student journal. And I was doing what we would call like featured images today. You know, it's kind of like the next step up above message board signatures. And but at the time, every article that went up on this journal was a static HTML file. Yeah, not even using like includes or anything. It was like copy paste the previous article, put that into a static file, and get it online. So
why change that?
That's exactly. Which is an interesting kind of combination of ignorance and limited skill set, you know, that kind of makes you aware of why there is a better way. And so a couple years into that, as I became an upperclassman, I kind of flipped that whole website into WordPress. That was my first WordPress site.
Wow. So you chose to use WordPress for this big, serious project, even though you hadn't used it before?
Yeah.
Just as research?
It may sound bigger than it was. It was a small student-run journal, so it needed a way for these other students to publish their own articles because I wasn't going to be there forever, and I couldn't copy and paste HTML markup every day. So we gave them, you know, the tools they needed in WordPress at the time. That was towards the beginning of custom post types. So we had like articles and reviews and things like that. We were able to split up in a more logical way. And because I had a background in HTML and CSS before that, I've always done custom themes. So I don't think that I've ever really used an out-of-the-box theme for any project across my career, which has pros and cons. You know,
Yeah,
things take longer, but I also have, I think, probably a better understanding of those fields because of it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So you did your research, you picked WordPress, you used it on the project, and after that, you were kind of like, I don't know, getting into it. Did that turn into new projects?
Yeah, I mean, web design through college was always like a job, I guess you would say, like a way to help make means end on the side. But
Yeah.
I was really interested in game design and 3D animation.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in this major called digital media that combined all three of these disciplines. And the idea was you kind of like graduated from one year to the next. You went from traditional design to web design, graphic design, and then like your upperclassmen years were generally devoted to animation. And so I think just because of the way that program was set up, it was like you knew that like the upperclassmen are always working on animation. That was the cool thing. That was the thing you were going to get to do one day. And it was kind of just set up that way that most people saw animation, I think, almost as like a superior art form in a way, because that came after web design, at least in terms of your learning experience. So I think I struggled with that for a long time, because ultimately I did decide to not pursue animation as a career, which had a lot to do with location, because as I graduated, I moved back to Pittsburgh, and it became pretty clear that I was either going to have to find a place to live in New York or LA, or one of the major metropolitan areas where animation was more common, and instead decided to look for a web design job. It was something I had always known and more comfortable with, and found a job on Craigslist, working for an invention company in Pittsburgh.
Wow, an invention company? What?
Yeah.
Jeez. And Craigslist. That's great. I haven't talked to that many people. Like maybe a handful who got their start there. Yeah, that's cool.
So
a small company?
Small company. I was the only kind of in-house developer doing WordPress. And that was probably my first real serious site build. Multiple custom post types, custom theme. We had a sort of one post type that was dedicated just to inventions and to show off like these digital prototypes of each invention. So I kind of designed this like one-page app that each inventor would get to market and pass around to various companies that were shopping for inventions. So that was cool. That was my first real like opportunity to see my work in the hands of another person, like seeing value from it. Which I think is important, because a lot of times we hand off sites and that's the end of it, right? Like the person we built it for either doesn't pursue it or kind of gets lost in the mix. And it was cool to see my work actually out there in the hands of people getting used. So
that's a good reflection, I think. It makes me think of just like all kinds of any art, anything that we create, that just the feedback problem.
Yeah.
All of us just like make so much stuff, and web design, while it, you know, we don't often classify it in like the same way, but it's still like an artistic creation, that especially how we were doing it in the Wild West days, where we were responsible for every part of the project, like all the little details we were doing, which I'm sure you remember. There wasn't a team with their designated responsibilities. We're architecting like this full experience and just putting it out, and never really getting much of any feedback. But it just, there's so much that changes about the experience and how you feel about your craft when there's a sense of, I don't think appreciation's the right way, but like that it's making an impact somehow.
Yeah.
That the work matters, really.
Definitely. And it's something I really appreciate in my current position with Give, is seeing these nonprofits, you know, use our work for really good causes. I mean, it's when you think about like hoping that your work makes a difference, the type of people that use Give, that's kind of, it's hard to find a more you know, like deserving audience than folks that are trying to make differences in the way that they are.
And
for causes ranging all over the place.
It's like one of the coolest things. There is so much that I love about what we do. I love the culture of the community that we work in. I love the software that we get to work with. I am very proud of the products that we sell. I love the colleagues that I work with, and just everything about it. I like the expectations that we have in our remote work, oriented technology, modern just economy, and but like that's one thing that not all of us get, and you guys, I've observed that before. What you said, working at Give, is a base of customers which you really appreciate and value, and can. It's like total chance if I come across a customer in my experience where I'm like, wow, this is super cool. I am so happy and thrilled and proud to be somehow participating with and assisting in your efforts. That's something that you get to experience constantly. Most of the rest of us just creating tools for regular websites. Who knows what people are going to do with this? Who knows what kind of goofy things they're going to try and sell with EDD? But if there's one thing that I envy about your position, what you guys get to do, it's that, just this awesome base of customers. It's so cool.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right that it is more common working for a company like Give, and just because of the nature of the tools we build. But even I get lost in the day-to-day so often of the development. And we just released in the last release, we put this form grid shortcode that we released that allows people to display multiple forms for different causes, like on one page. And I had a hand in the development of that. And I just remember being so worried about like browser compatibility. And this is one of the first times we were using CSS Grid in production. So there was a lot of like nuts and bolts thinking going on in the production of that feature. And then it gets released, and we have this Facebook group of Give users, and someone just posted like how stoked they were to have this on their site. They shared a link to it. It's like, that light bulb moment goes off. It's like, wow, you actually built this. Someone is using it and loving it. And like, you're right that we have a lot of customers that make you proud to do what you do, but you still got to remind yourself. You still got to consciously take yourself out of the moment, out of the code you're writing, and to take that time every once in a while, because it's easy to get wrapped up in the day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. It totally is. We answer support ticket after support ticket and GitHub issue after GitHub issue.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit caught up in that, and it's important to often remind ourselves like what it's about, what it's for, and put ourselves in the. Sometimes have a little empathy for the customers who are trying to build a business on it. Yeah. It's the case with us. Or
really helpful to have a marketing team that pursues these Give stories. So they find someone that has found success with our product, and it's not just about using our product, but what they were able to do as a whole. And I think that's something that any organization can do, whether you don't have to be doing these altruistic causes that a lot of our Give customers are. It could be building a business. For any purpose. I think if you have a product that people are finding value from, take that time to get their story on the record. I think that provides kind of inspiration to anyone who's looking to do the same, no matter the type of work. So that's something I really appreciate our marketing team taking the time to do and documenting it. And kind of gives us a nice boost internally, when one of those goes out. So
yeah, I love that stuff. You guys are really good with the content, and have an awesome base of customers to pull from with the coolest stories ever. Let's go back to your story, though. We didn't connect the dots completely and get us caught up to how you ended up here. So you were building websites just like I was back in the day too. Little things that probably you'd look at and chuckle about now, but it was a different time. And now, in between that, how did you eventually end up?
So I was at this invention company. At the time, like working for an agency was kind of like this thing on a pedestal to me. It was like, it was my next step in my career that I had to prove myself I could work for an agency.
Oh, all right.
But interviewed for a position. I think it was a quote like senior developer position. I think they, the feedback was they really liked me, but I didn't quite have the experience for a senior level position. But the thing that I ended up going back and working for this agency about a year later, the thing that they remembered was during a co-op experience. So Drexel does these 6-month co-ops when you're in your junior year. I work for the Smithsonian Institution, and I did this like museum welcome guide. It was basically an HD TV hooked up to a Nintendo Wii that museum visitors could come in, pick up the controller, and basically point and click through the museum and like get a tour. And that little project was built in Adobe Flash with like a Bluetooth connection to the Wii remote, and like I had forgotten about it by the time I was interviewing for this job, but like it really stood out to these folks because it was just different and unique. And when they invited me back in a year later for an interview, that's what they brought up, and I was like, I'm glad I threw that in my random printout portfolio for them.
Wow.
So I ended up working for this agency. It was a shopper marketing agency, which means basically anything you sell in a grocery store. And we had kind of like specific connections with Starbucks, Heinz, Seattle's Best Coffee. So it was a bunch of these like sweepstakes sites that would go up and down. So you would have a 30-day sweepstakes, something on the back of a ketchup bottle to like win tickets to the big game or like something like that. Yeah. And this was the first time in my career I had a chance to work with someone else, like a pair programming experience, with everything up until then was pretty much me on my own, whether it was internally or freelancing. Mm-hmm. So I got a chance to really just be the front end developer, and I was working with a really experienced back end developer in .NET, which I had very little experience in otherwise, because anything I'd done before that was PHP and WordPress. So I had a chance to just be the designer, be the front end implementer, and really focus on that side of the work for about 1.5 years, until eventually that agency kind of folded, and I decided to open my own business, which I had for 3 years doing custom WordPress sites. And it was at that time, towards the end of that, where I finally got involved in the WordPress community and went to an in-person meetup, because this was like 8 or 9 years into using WordPress. I had never met another person doing WordPress. I had never chatted with someone online. It was something that didn't occur to me. Like WordPress was just this tool that I used to make stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing. There's probably a lot of people out there that view it the same way, that until their kind of eyes are open to the community, that they don't realize how much is out there for them. So.
So true.
And at that time, WordPress Pittsburgh was starting planning for its first year in, I guess it would be 2016. And I decided to pitch a talk, and I decided to volunteer and help organize. So it was all 3 of those things in one day. And that was also the day when I met Devin and Jason from Give in person at WordCamp. And that kind of led to where I'm at today.
Wow. Okay. So not too many hops along the way, really.
Probably 3 or 4 big ones.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's pretty cool, and also like pretty direct, like very appropriate and strategic steps up in the right direction.
Yeah, it's all on how you frame the story. No, it was a lot of wandering and guessing where you'll be next, but in hindsight, yeah, there were some key moments that took me from one mood to the next, kind of mostly by necessity.
Do you look back on yourself as like someone who was very driven and deliberate about the direction that you wanted to go, like deciding this is where I want to end up and I'm going to do what it takes to get there, or someone more taking wisely taking advantage of the opportunities that crossed your path and seeing where that takes you, somewhere in between.
I think at that point where I decided to open my own business and really embrace like custom website development and really go full force into WordPress, at that point, most things became pretty deliberate. But until then, I was really wrapped up in this idea that web design was this like second fiddle to animation.
How funny.
Because a big part of it was that most of my best friends through college had moved out west. I was seeing their names appear in credits of Pixar movies and DreamWorks and like the biggest blockbusters. Some of my best friends are, still at those studios now, and I get to see like, oh, you're working on The Incredibles too. Like that could have been me. It's always this what if, or at least it was for a long time. And I think just through maturity and experience, you start to realize like, okay, well, you have skills that they don't have either now. That you've got 8 years under your belt doing web design, that that layout that you just coded would probably be just as foreign to them as that animation scene that they just got credited for. So it's just perspective through maturity that finally gives you the like, you're okay, like do your own thing, and then just go full force into it and find your niche, because I was playing this jack of all trades thing for so long. Any company I went into, I was doing video production, I was doing web design. They would find out like, oh, you can do After Effects animation, or you can do Flash. And I became this person wearing many hats. And it was only when I started my own business where I could really dig into web development and WordPress and really start to specialize.
Right. Wow. So let's talk about your role right now. What is it that you're responsible for at WordPress? What are the things you get to do day to day?
Sure. So most of the last year has been devoted to this upcoming plugin, WP Business Reviews, which probably no one is familiar with because it's yet to be released. But we are gathering beta testers for it, and it is meant to gather business reviews from different platforms like Facebook, Yelp, Google, and centralize them all on your WordPress site. So the need that we saw is that you might have these great reviews out on your social networks, but the point of purchase and the place where most of your audience is making their final decision is on your website, where those reviews typically are not. So this is kind of a proven concept that Devin, who's our head of product at Give, Devin Walker, had put these kind of smaller plugins together before he started Give that were focused on, specifically Yelp reviews, Google, Facebook. And we've had those out on the plugin directory for quite a few years now that still have a big audience. But what we realized is we were kind of doing everything different with each platform, but there was a lot of similarities. So with this new plugin, okay, let's bring all these platforms under one roof and really try to dry up the code base and take advantage of what is similar amongst them. So what my role has been a lot of API work, dealing with each of these platforms. The decision we made was to try to normalize the API responses from each platform so that when it comes in from Google or comes in from Facebook or from Yelp, the first step is to take those responses, create a normalized object, and then from there, any functionality that we build into our plugin can be used for any platform. So that's the idea, is to make this really extensible and hopefully open it up to other platforms. After release, we focused on these big 3 or 4 to start, and we'll be looking at other platforms as long as they basically have a REST API. We can normalize that response and help you present those reviews on your site.
Wow. I didn't realize that it was an aggregator of reviews and not a tool for soliciting reviews. Yeah,
that will be part of it, but the primary purpose is for the aggregation and display of reviews that you already have.
Okay.
But obviously, once you are displaying what you already have, the next step will be to get more of them. and that'll be something we're looking into in the future. But,
cool.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Really focusing on the display and like crisp, clean front-end display with customizable styles, a few different built-in display formats, grids, galleries, lists. And then we'll go from there.
This a project where you're really getting to flex your CSS muscles and explore grid and modular CSS a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Because we are dealing with these different data sources and also different display themes across the various display formats we have in the plugin, right? So we may be displaying a review from Google or from Facebook or Yelp, and a lot of the styles that are used in any of those platforms are similar. So it's been a real practice in like CSS modularity to not have to rewrite the styles for each platform, but to use what we can that's similar across all of them, and then kind of have a theme layer within our styles, within the architecture of our styles that can be applied on top of that to only tweak what's needed to make them, platform specific.
Modular CSS is an interest of yours? It's something you're kind of getting into?
And it really has its roots in my early days as a front-end developer. So I've always kind of felt I was like a front-end developer first and then learn back-end as needed. And goes back to that agency position that I was explaining, where that was really my focus. And I didn't have to be that back-end person as well. And, over the years, I've always felt like even though both skill sets are going up, that front end always kind of takes the lead on the back end in terms of PHP and object-oriented programming, which I'm catching up on now. But definitely CSS modularity is a big focus of mine, especially as Gutenberg comes into the picture.
Why especially now as Gutenberg is in the picture does CSS modularity matter?
So there's a lot of talks coming out and articles that are focused on JavaScript and learning JavaScript deeply,
sure.
Which definitely is a requirement with Gutenberg. But this idea that everything is a block means that it's not just all your functionality is a block, but that everything that is related to that functionality should be modular as well. So because I'm a lot more comfortable on the CSS side of things than I am JavaScript, that's kind of been the focus I've taken in this conversation. And I was able to give a talk at WordCamp San Diego about a CSS architecture called inverted triangle CSS. It's by a guy named Harry Roberts of CSS Wizardry. It's his kind of like Twitter handle that he's been very well known for a long time. Between him and Chris Coyier of CSS Tricks, most of my philosophy on writing CSS is attributed to those two. And the idea is that you write styles in layers. So you start with like your general settings, you go into your generic styles. So like any classes, your H1s, your H2s, your anchor links, and then you go into your objects and your components. So that's where you do like your really specific styles. And those are the things that are pulled into what you would consider a Gutenberg block.
Okay.
So when that became really obvious to me, like the importance of it, is I started to look at what the Gutenberg team was doing with their core blocks. And it was like every block had its own chunk of CSS that was separate from everything else. And I'm thinking like, well, I usually considered my CSS to be one whole that serves the entire website, not segregated into, Gutenberg blocks only, and then theme styles over here and plugin styles over here. But I wanted to kind of present a system that could feed all of it in a way that was as dry as possible.
Wow, I like that. It sounds challenging, a little bit tricky to accomplish. Like as you're iterating on a project and introducing new rules, you like re-architecting your CSS to include things is just so much more challenging than it is to just like plop it in. Here's the new stuff, or just append it to the bottom. of your CSS. That's the easy way.
That's a really good point, and I've had the experience of dealing with that through Give, which is I think like a 3-year-old code base at this point, and at least in terms of when our custom styles were written for it,
right,
versus WP Business Reviews, which I had the chance to basically write from the ground up, starting a little less than a year ago. So I have this like really rigid structure that follows this inverted triangle CSS, and then I pop over into Give on occasion to help with issues there. And it's like, okay, how do we make this work with this code base that's already very well established? So in a way, we kind of just pick up where we left off. It's like from here going forward, we'll write things according to this methodology, because you also, as a plugin developer, have to be aware of how many other third-party developers out there have customized your code.
Yeah.
So, which wow.
Sure. Yeah. A thing or two about it, I guess. It makes me think, like, I love foundational principles like this, like a philosophy that you can build from. And I wonder, though, if a philosophy like this, and if you think, it can apply equally well to a legacy project as it can to a fresh project. Like, obviously, as we just discussed, they're quite different. And you can't, it's quite a task to retrofit a philosophy like this to an established project, especially one as large as something like WordPress. But it's a piece of cake and brilliant to start a fresh project with this philosophy.
Right.
Do you think it's appropriate and constructive to retrofit something like this to legacy code base?
So it brings up this whole semantic versioning question, right? Where if your project is clear about how you version your code, the idea is that with semantic versioning, let me pull up the website here. So it's semver.org, semver.org.
Right.
For anyone who's unfamiliar with this way of versioning your software is that anytime you jump a major version, for example, from 1.5.3 to 2.0, the idea is that you're signaling to your audience that you are making a breaking change, that you should not expect to simply update to it and have nothing change at all if you've significantly altered that code or extended it. And we don't have that in WordPress. So to answer your question, like, no, I wouldn't pitch this to the WordPress core team and be like, all your styles should be rewritten according to this naming methodology, because you'd break most people's code that have extended WordPress core styles.
Yeah.
At the same time, there is certainly, it's a good case study for why you should write your styles this way, because if you look in the WordPress admin, there is button styles that are literally named button, like class equals button.
Yeah.
Well, any plugin in the world could have class equals button, and you're going to have theme conflicts and plugin conflicts and things like that. So
sure.
Yeah, part of the CSS and the BEM naming convention is to kind of avoid conflicts like that and really modularize your components so that there are kind of hard boundaries between what interacts with each other. At the same time, there are different degrees of difficulty, I think, when you talk about, is this possible to be retrofitted into an existing project? And when I think of other CSS methodologies like CSS in JS, which is a completely different approach to writing CSS, like that's almost impossible to retrofit on a more classic plugin that doesn't have that kind of build process in place already. So what I really like about this CSS approach is that it can work for anyone. You don't have to totally revamp your build processes or get on to Webpack or all of that. It's it can work anywhere. It's certainly easier if you've got a build process or using Sass preprocessors, to separate your code if nothing else. But I kind of try to find a middle of the road approach that accomplishes all of these modular and scalability challenges without really forcing you into this ultra modern JavaScript build process.
Yeah. And the rest of the team's on board?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for the new plugin. It's still a bit of a learning process for, where do these new styles go? Because they're generally pulling from existing styles that are already elsewhere in the code base. So I often get checked by them when I make a suggestion. It's like, oh, we can't do that because someone's probably customized that class. So that's something we're really good about, or at least trying to be really good about. It's not affecting existing customers who have probably already styled our give forms, according to their theme or look at their site. So yeah, we're definitely more limited in what we can do in that regard because it's a legacy code base, but for good reason.
The Gutenberg project is it's humming along and affecting all of us quite a bit. How's it impacting the team over at WordPress and your two big products?
Yeah, so for Give, at least, we've been kind of publishing this series called Playing with Blocks on our blog as we go through this process and make decisions based on how we're going to adapt to Gutenberg. And one of the last articles that I wrote was called Auditing Your Plugin for Gutenberg. And it was about our experience of going through our plugin and seeing where Gutenberg makes the most sense. And we started with pretty much a full-on exploration of like, what if we rewrote our form editor in Gutenberg so that we had the built-in drag and drop functionality of Gutenberg, and that kind of like free thinking is something I would encourage, but also check it with reality, because it became clear that was a really big risk. I mean, right now we still don't know what the final interface is going to look like, let alone the functionality or the underlying classes or anything like that. So what we decided to settle on was to upgrade our shortcodes to blocks as quickly as possible, because that's really a win-win situation. Anyone adopting Gutenberg on day one will have these blocks available, especially like our donation form block, which is our most commonly embedded piece of code that people typically use shortcodes or widgets for. Now they can get that real-time preview in Gutenberg, which we've already shipped today. So if you enable Gutenberg, you can put our donation block in there and see how that works. Still a work in progress, but that's going to be available really early on in the Gutenberg lifecycle, which if you choose not to upgrade to Gutenberg, you still got your shortcodes and widgets that you have today. So when I say it's a win-win, that's what I mean, is that there's no negative consequences there. Whereas if we were to embrace Gutenberg 100% as our new form builder, we would either be leaving a lot of people behind who choose not to upgrade to it, or we would be maintaining this dual code base for quite a while. That would be a lot of extra work to basically make things work in both places.
Yeah. How do you personally feel about the direction things are going? Any apprehensions or any excitement or somewhere in between?
Yeah, I was really involved early on in the process, mostly from a testing standpoint. I was really following a lot of issues. My major concerns was how plugins were going to affect each other. Which is an issue I brought up to Matt Mullenweg at WordCamp US.
I remember that. Yeah, you asked a good question, actually. And I don't think that the answer was very direct.
No, it wasn't. And I'm not sure it is today either.
Darn. It's a good question.
But thanks. I am feeling better about it. So this idea of what if a plugin is not Gutenberg ready and breaks the editor, what happens? And people were like, well, that's always been the case, that a plugin could affect another. And like, yeah, that's true, but not to this degree, right? Because for the most part, we've been able to count on a predictable editing experience. And the second you introduce a second experience, you no longer have that predictability. So if basically if 9 out of your 10 plugins are Gutenberg ready and one is not, that's going to have the effect of telling your user, oh, Give or EDD isn't working on my site, where in reality it's this other plugin that's no longer maintained, right? Like when we think about it from the end user's perspective, all they know is their site's not working.
Yeah.
They're not going into the developer console or turning on Xdebug and figuring out exactly which one it is. They are blaming, who's most responsible for that website functioning. So that was a concern of mine. There's been more specifics that have come out to explain how those kind of conflicts will be handled. Most recently, I think I heard that a meta box can declare itself incompatible with Gutenberg. So not a specific plugin, but a specific meta box within a plugin can say it's not Gutenberg ready, which would cause the entire interface to revert to the classic editor. However, that requires that that developer has gone in and declared it not ready, because the default behavior is that it's going to try to work in Gutenberg. So it's a weird kind of catch-22. It's like you have to know enough to know that it's not ready, but not actually get it ready. So it's something I don't think we'll really fully know the answer to until it's used at scale. Yeah. But I've kind of stepped back in terms of my involvement in it, only because feedback only gets you so far. I think you have to have the time and the willingness to commit to make the change happen if you're going to be that much of a, like of a pot stirrer, so to speak. If you're going to continually come up with this feedback that is going against the path that's in place, you got to be the person that's willing to or able to put the time in to fix it. And I just, with my current position, don't have that time available. So.
Sure. Well, what sort of things do you like to do with your personal time, Kevin?
You know what? I've got 3 nieces right now, between my brother and my sister. I spend a lot of time with. So pretty much any free weekends is hanging out with them. Been big into the Marvel Universe movies coming out. Still haven't seen Infinity War, so no spoilers there.
None from me. A friend that really wanted me to go with him, so I've been trying to catch up, and I just had to check the list of how many I've missed, and it was a long list. I've watched like 2 Marvel movies since I've been married, which is almost 9 years now. It's a lot of catching up to do.
There's a good like 10-minute YouTube recap that'll get you ready.
That might be my
might be it.
achieve.
Yeah, I'm the same as you though. I'm like, man, I don't know who these Guardians are. Galaxy and oh man.
Right, yeah. There's now films about heroes that I wasn't even familiar. Even like when I was a teenager and I was into comic books and stuff like that. I still don't even know who some of these are.
Yeah, so get caught up on that someday, but
oh, that's a fun process.
Yeah, we're gonna start house shopping here soon, so that'll be another big commitment on the side, finding where we're gonna settle down next. And
house shopping. All right, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's we're in the same process right now.
Yeah. I have the luxury of kind of working from wherever, but my girlfriend is a teacher, so she got to kind of stay somewhere near her school district. So
sure, okay, yep. That's a fun, exhausting, intimidating process.
Yeah,
house shopping.
And then other than that, WordPress Pittsburgh is picking up in terms of the organizing for this next year.
Right.
Which I'm volunteer wrangling for. So,
all right, that's a big responsibility.
It is. Yeah, Terry has been awesome in the last couple of years handling that, but I'm going to try to pitch in, help a little bit more this year, take that off her plate. I think we're on the calendar for September 22nd. So,
oh wow!
Hopefully, you'll see you there.
I've been meaning to make it to Pittsburgh for the past couple of years, and it's not. In fact, actually, I was booked to speak last year and had an Airbnb and everything, and then our daughter came.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a valid excuse.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and September 22nd. That doesn't work for me this year either. We have our annual all hands retreat for the team that week. So
I think we conflict with WordCamp Los Angeles too. So.
Oh, what a bummer.
We're dealing with a few scheduling conflicts there, but always works out.
You think you make it? That's another question. Are you going to make it to any other events this year?
I should definitely be at US, because that's, basically Give does 2 like all hands events in the US. So we do San Diego because that's where we're headquartered, which I was just at last month, and then we'll do US in December. And then between those 2, it's pretty much if we can get if we're sponsoring or if we're speaking, those are kind of the 2 preconditions for whether I end up at other WordCamps throughout the year. So
sure. You're pretty close by a few in Ohio, where I'm going to be at.
Yeah. So what do we have there? Columbus, Cincinnati, Kent.
Dayton is this coming weekend. I'll be there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and Kent is next month. Columbus and Cincinnati are not currently scheduled.
Yeah, so, I've dialed back my applications recently because we're trying to get this business reviews plugin done.
Yeah.
Yep, but I think once that's ready, I'll probably pick up the speaking again more frequently. So. Sure.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's probably a good location. I think there's a lot in reasonable driving distance.
Yeah, we've had some nice growth. We started with about 100. We had like 160 or 70 last year. Looking at over 200 this year. So
yeah,
and we're still on one-day camp. So
there's several different camps in Pennsylvania too.
Yeah,
it's kind of nice these days where we can like basically go to WordCamps as often as we feel like we want to. Which I appreciate that. I feel like that's such a privilege.
The Rust Belt region.
Yeah.
Teams with 4 or 5 in Ohio and Pittsburgh, and I think there's 2 or 3 in the middle of the state, and then Philly, of course. So
yeah. We've got 4 in Michigan this year, so I can go as often as I want to.
Yeah. And then we got the monthly meetups.
Yep.
And that, so
it's pretty cool.
Good time to be a WordPresser.
It really is. It really is. Maybe this is like the golden age that we'll look back at. What are the names of some people that you recommend I have on the show in the future?
You had Josh Pollock?
Yeah, for sure. Ages ago.
Okay. He's maybe due for an update.
Yeah, he's relocating back to Pittsburgh.
That's right. I think he, as of a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Bridget Willard, have you had her?
A long time ago, yeah.
She's doing a lot of marketing, and then like she has some like social packages now she's doing.
Right.
Her own business.
Yep. She's getting busy.
To catch up with her. Rachel Cherry. Yep. Just left Disney and is doing her own thing, so I'm sure she has some stories.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, Roy Sivan, her old Disney working mate, is still at Disney doing his own thing.
Right.
He's gone. Roy has an interesting Gutenberg plugin he's working on that structures Gutenberg data. So you know how like when you save Gutenberg content, it's in like the HTML comment blob. So he's written a plugin that like parses it out into a custom table so that it's more structured as like a JSON object, but it's also compatible with Gutenberg. So
wow, okay,
be good to talk to about that.
Yeah, Roy's a good suggestion. He hasn't been on the show before.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, thanks for the recommendations. That's good, Kevin. Sure. And it's about time to wrap up. I'll be respectful of your time. It's probably time for you to wrap up. It's time for you to head out and get some dinner with the wife and baby.
Sounds good. I really appreciate you having me on, Kyle.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and keep doing the cool stuff you're doing. WordCamp Pittsburgh is going to be awesome. Have fun with the volunteers, and I look forward to the release of WP Business Reviews, your remarkable work, and inspecting all of that modular CSS, taking lessons from that, and seeing some of your excellent talks in the future. These slides, I didn't compliment before, but they're really good. This is compelling stuff.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so keep up the good work, and I'll see you at a future WordCamp, man.
Sounds good. Later, Kyle.
All right.